time, and then Keith will be back next week. Not going to get into anything big. Some of this may be a little bit of review for some. I think it's good to reinforce these thoughts. But one of the even bigger reasons is that I'm bringing this Sunday school lesson this morning is because it'll help pave the way to some things I have to say in the morning service. And so all those things considered, I felt like the Lord would be in having this lesson. Turn with me to Genesis chapter 4. It hasn't ceased to fail in the last few Lord's days. Actually, since prior to Brother Ross coming, it seems like every Sunday there's been some kind of backstage drama that distracts, and this morning is no exception. I don't feel well. My head's clogged up from allergies, and I just would ask that you pray for me. Pray especially through the morning message. Why religion in and of itself? Why religious activity isn't enough is something I believe that we need to be able to thoroughly explain. I remember having an interaction with one of the guys I used to work with, and it's not a person I work with now, but it was one I had worked with years ago, and I had talked to him about the Lord a little bit. I had invited him to services, and he, as many said, I'm not a fan of organized religion. He said that to me, and I knew what he was saying. I don't want to come to church. I don't do church. I don't like church. I'm not a fan of organized religion. And I responded by saying, I'm not a fan of organized religion either. I think it's pretty much worthless. And he was blown away. He didn't know where I was going with that, and he didn't understand how a preacher, a pastor, would say, I'm not a fan of organized religion. And I took him to Genesis 4 to show him what I was talking about. And a little backstory of Genesis 4, I believe that the Lord had instructed Adam very thoroughly on how to worship him. I think as they communed in the cool of the day, that the Lord instructed Adam. Adam knew his responsibility with Eve and knew his responsibility with his children, and that he would have instructed them on what the Lord requires. Think about Adam. Think about the fact that he was created in the image of God. And let that play out and sink in a little bit. That Adam was like God in characteristic. He would have been very faithful, loving, conscientious. He would have been very thoughtful in what he's doing. God is very thoughtful in what he's doing. He would have had goals and desired outcomes for everything that he was doing. God has purposes for everything that he's doing. Adam was like God. He was created in the image of God. I didn't say Adam was God. I said he was like God. He would have been responsible and faithful and desirous to communicate what God had entrusted to him so that he could raise a family in that same vein, in that same light. And so we come to verse 4, and Adam and Eve come together. She conceives, and they have sons. We come to verse 3, in the process of time it came to pass that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto the Lord. And Abel he also brought of the firstlings of his flock and the fat thereof. And the Lord had respect unto Abel and to his offering, but unto Cain and to his offering he had not respect. And Cain was very wroth, and his countenance fell. And we know how that all ended up. Cain's offering represents religious activity. Hebrews gives us a commentary on what was taking place, and that Abel's offering was an offering of faith. It was an offering based on believing God. It was an offering based on believing that God is. It was an offering based on a relationship with God where he is trying to please God. Cain's offering was not. Cain's offering was the work of his hands, the fruit of the ground. It wasn't a blood sacrifice. It wasn't done obediently. It wasn't done in faith. And it wasn't accepted by God. It didn't add to his moral standing before God. And that, in a nutshell, is the problem or the inadequacy of religious activity for the sake of religious activity. The religious activity that many people are so confident in. I do this and I don't do that, and they're so confident that that will be good enough. In Cain's thought process, that I will bring God. Not what he told me to bring. Not doing what he told me to do. But maybe the thought process was, I will impress God with what I've brought. And the work of my hands. Look at this. But it wasn't done in obedience. It wasn't done by faith. It wasn't done striving to honor him and flowing out of that relationship that they had, like Adam or like Abel. And it fell short. It fell short of what was necessary. And why then we want to look at several things about religious activity for the sake of religious activity. Religious activity for the sake of making oneself right with God. And there are so many religious systems that you can't even name them all, a number of them all, because they vary slightly. But if it isn't by grace alone, through faith alone, based on the finished work of Christ alone, the only other option is earn it somehow by my merit, earn it somehow by my religious activity, earn it somehow by what I stop doing. Sometimes it's as easy as what I stop doing in the minds of people. Religion falls short of fixing man's sin problem. Religious activity falls short of fixing man's sin problem, in part because of a wrong understanding of man concerning himself. We inherently think, and you hear this, you see this in the Bible, the Philippian jailer asked Paul, what must I do? We inherently think, just tell me what it is. We inherently think, just give me a list. We inherently think, I'm good enough. We're getting so far post-God in our thinking that more and more we inherently aren't even worried about God. God, don't care. It doesn't matter to me. And religious activity in and of itself doesn't fix that. Religious activity sees man not only as able to fix whatever's needing fixed to be satisfactory to God, but it sees that of their own doing. I work this up in myself. I'm good enough. I just need a makeover. I'm qualified in and of myself. I just need to refine myself or rebuild myself a little bit. And that falls so far short of man's need. Now, I think some evidences of that shortfall manifest themselves in the religious landscape of the day. Lacking in real unity with the Lord, lacking in real relationships with the Lord, churches have had to go to more of an entertainment basis. Churches have had to go to more of a keep them busy, keep them occupied, keep them entertained, and so that brings in all sorts of, I think, pitfalls, all sorts of, Brother Keener wrote a tract called Sunday Morning Circus, all sorts of things to get people's attention. And it's just an evidence that religion in and of itself falls short. Obviously, I'm not trying to disparage local churches coming together, meeting together, singing songs together, having times of Sunday school and preaching and having other activities and events. I'm not decrying those things. I'm not trying to detract from saved men and women striving daily to work out their salvation with fear and trembling, like Paul said. That I'm not taking away from those things. I'm just saying they're not part of the saving merit on our side of the column. Man in and of himself cannot change who he is. Religion in and of itself can't get one to change internally. You may change externally. Many of the testimony of when the Lord began to work on an individual, conviction was wrought in the heart, and we, maybe you, I know I, was convinced I've got to do some stuff, and I've got to stop doing some stuff to be a Christian. The problem is the Bible teaches us that man can't change himself. Somebody, if you would, read Jeremiah 13:23. Whoever, sword drill, go. Whoever wants to read it. Jeremiah 13:23.
It says, "Can the Ethiopian change his skin or the leopard his spots? Then may ye also do good that are accustomed to do evil."
So we have within ourselves the nature that is sinful. And all of the religious activity in the world doesn't change that nature. It may change one's appearance. I am thankful for religious activity to the extent that it creates an environment where you're less concerned to walk down a dark street at night. You know, I can remember, my mom was born in 41. So my mom was born in 41. And I remember as a young boy, her telling me that her dad used to have to go to Toledo. We lived in a rural town about 40 miles away from Toledo. And her dad weekly my grandpa had to go to Toledo. And he would take her to Toledo with him and give her some money and say, be back here at 5 o'clock. And turn her loose in Toledo all day. Even when she was telling me this in probably the 70s when I was a young teenager maybe, I'm like, Was Grandpa out of his mind? And she's like, it was nothing. It was no big deal. I walked through stores, I had ice cream, I had a great day every week. We went to Toledo, and which was interesting. Her time with her dad was him dropping her off and giving her some money and turning her loose in Toledo a lot of times. But it was a culture that was quite different than now. Even in a couple of generations, just a couple of generations, we've come so far away from God. We've come so far away from godly principles. And so I'm not blind to the fact there are some benefits to religious activity as a whole, to church-going people that know better than to harm little kids on the street, than to, the old adage was nobody ever locked their doors at night. There wasn't any need to. And my neighbor never locked his doors there in Wasion. And at least he never locked his garage doors. And one time I needed some gasoline. And he came home to find me in his garage pouring his gas into my lawnmower. Made us both laugh. But that was okay. He's already walked into our house and walked right to a cupboard and said, hey, my wife forgot to get some of these, and we're having soup. Do you have any crackers? And he's like, it's not the right cupboard for crackers over there. Oh, cool, thanks. And he grabs the crackers and walks back out of the house. It was a different time. And that was just good neighbors. We had that kind of relationship. Did you break their window, or did Brittany?
I would imagine it was probably.
Yeah. And you didn't even get too mad about that? Mm-hmm. Scott, baseball. Garage window. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was And so I'm not discounting what religious activity does for society. I'm not blind to that. And I'm thankful for what it does do. And we've come so far from it, you can see that there is some value there. But what it can't do, and what we need to get firmly in our minds, that religious activity in and of itself cannot save a person. We cannot, through religious activity, change who we are. Can the leopard change his spots? Can one change his skin? Can one do that? And he uses that illustration, Jeremiah uses that illustration to say, no more are those two things possible than it is for you who are sinful to change your sinfulness on your own. Can't do it. Man in and of himself cannot change his nature. Somebody, if you're still in Jeremiah, grab 17:9. Jeremiah 17:9.
The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it?
As I understand the word desperately in that passage, the Hebrew word that is translated desperately, it carries with it the idea of a desperate situation, a hopeless situation. And read it that way. He's hopelessly wicked. What is Jeremiah telling us? That the heart is hopelessly wicked. I can't change that. I can't fix that. I can't change my spots. I can't produce in myself a new heart. Religious activity claims to be that which can fix it. Religious activity claims to be that which can merit a good standing before God. And it's impossible. The problem's in the heart. And it's impossible to change for me to change my own heart. That's why John records the Lord saying to Nicodemus, you must be born again. That's why Paul talks in Ephesians 2, you hath he quickened who were dead in trespasses and sin. And he ends that passage with, you're his workmanship. So the reason that religion as a means to make oneself right with God, the reasons plural. I can't change my nature. I can't change my heart. I can't work regeneration in myself. Even the Lord said in John 3 that it's the work of the Spirit moving. And you can't see the Spirit. The work of the Spirit like the wind moving. You can't see that, but you see the effect of it. You see men and women's lives changed. There needs to be outside influence. And I qualify that divine outside influence to change a heart, to change a life. Somebody read 2 Corinthians 3:18 if you would. 2 Corinthians 3:18.
But we all with open face, beholding as in the glass the glory of the Lord, are changed into the same image from glory to glory, even as by the Spirit of the Lord.
The Spirit of the Lord does the working and the changing, and we're changed. And it's not a makeover on the outside. It's not a religious cage that corrals us and keeps us from doing what we'd really rather do, just won't. But we're changed by the Spirit of God from the inside. And that changes everything else that's manifest in so many different ways in our lives. And religious activity in and of itself can't lastingly produce that. Over the years, I've met many people that have had a religious experience. Maybe under the preaching of somebody I knew, maybe under my preaching, maybe circumstances in their lives that caused them to sober and say, I better get serious about my life. And they, for a time, they'll start attending church somewhere. They'll start being very faithful. They may, for a time, look very faithful and seem to be quite committed and quite, from the inside, changed. But so many times, you see, and this is perfect to what Seth had to talk about, had to share with us this morning. I can count so many times where they started out strong. They looked like the Lord had really gotten a hold of them. And a year, I've seen it 10, 15 years. And they get to the point where they're as far as religious activity will take them, and they've had their stomach full of being told what to do. They've had their stomach full of having a cage put around them, and they finally just want out. And they go crazy many times. They manifest that there was nothing in the heart. Jude talks about being kept by the power of God. Seth talked this morning about of course, Paul especially, enduring, Job enduring. And through trials and hardships and things that would have made many, many people just say, it's not worth it. Religion, in and of itself, doesn't produce a man like Job. Religion, in and of itself, doesn't produce a man like Paul. Religion, in and of itself, doesn't produce a man like Stephen. It's impossible, apart from the working of God. And we need to come to grips with that. We need to be able to understand it. We need to be able to see it. When that principle is being violated, we need to be able to identify it and say, wait a minute. You're telling a man to save himself by doing X. And we need to be able to see it, identify it, and at least be aware of it and not fall into the trap of it. And maybe whenever the situation prayerfully calls for it, to stand up and say, no, wait a minute. No. The Bible calls upon us, I'll have somebody read it, 1 Peter 1:15. 1 Peter 1:15.
But as he which hath called you is holy, so be ye holy in all manner of conversation.
As he is holy, perfect, not one flaw. As he is holy, the requirement for me, be ye holy. A thinking person quickly says, how do I do that? How do I accomplish what is required of me? Be ye holy as he is holy, in all manner of conversation. And a thinking person, thinking biblically, says, I can't do that on my own. I can go to church like Sunday was every day of the week, and I could. And even that, so many times I would fall into the category of, look at me. I go to the church meetings way more than you do. And even in that we get prideful. Could get prideful. And so as we ponder on that biblically, religious activity in and of itself can't make me holy. It may, in our illustration, like my mom going to Toledo as a little girl, and so that would have been in the probably late 50s. And you can in your mind envision the late 50s and say, well, it was a better time. In some senses. You weren't as worried as you would be today. But it still wasn't perfect. It wasn't even close. There was still crime. There were still things that went on in the dark alleys that she needed to not be around to be saved. And so we begin to grapple with the reality. I can't save myself. I can't produce what the Lord requires. I can't change my heart. I can't be holy as he is holy. And forces me to look to Him. That forces me to surrender to Him. Forces me to look outside myself. And if by grace the Lord doesn't work in one's heart, then the religious activity, James talks about pure religion and undefiled is this. And he makes a little bit of a list. Not exhaustive, but some items that reflect pure, healthy religious activity. The first one that comes to my mind is visit the fatherless and the widows. Care for those who need caring for. So it has a value in its place. And its first value is to honor the Lord. To be faithful to He that saved me. To Him that saved me. And so this lays a groundwork. It's not only something we need to be really well versed in and comfortable in defending, being able to, as I said before, see it and identify it and see it for what it is. But this thought process lays a groundwork for what the Lord's laid upon my heart for the morning message as we continue that series on the message of the cross. And the one this morning will be a little different, but not the message, but just how it's presented. So I pray that by God's grace, Titus tells us this, the same grace that brings salvation teaches us. I pray that by grace, the Spirit of God would reveal to us. And to say that it's by grace is to say it's not of any particular intellectual genius that anybody has, that they see the truth, any truth at all. It's not because one person is sharper, brighter, more intellectual than another. It's God teaching. I've listened to, and I try to make it a point to listen to, incredibly intellectual people trying to sharpen my intellect, which needs a lot of sharpening, I know. And yet sometimes some of the most basic truths of the Scriptures, I see that God hasn't revealed some certain things to some people. And Lord, why have you revealed that truth to me? I know who I am. And I know the limits of my intellect. And yet the Lord has revealed such wonderful and blessed truths. And so if by grace He shows individuals the truth of His power to save, and shows them then religious activity in the proper place as an outflowing of one's heart's desire to honor God. And that's where James will bring us to a conclusion. And he said, I'll show you my faith by my works. Let's pray. Our Father, we would ask, Lord, this morning that you would be with us in a very powerful way. Lord, I do pray for our time together in the morning service around your word. I pray, Father, that your word would go forth clearly, concisely, accurately. That you would remove distractions, you would remove the weaknesses of this frail body, and cause your word to go forth in power. We ask it in the name of Christ.